What was the most fucked up thing you saw at your school? NSFW. Middle school. Girl had the sewing machine needle go right through her finger. The left with the needle and thread just hanging out. Another kid had an X-Acto knife stabbed right into his wrist, by accident, so close to the artery. High school. Girl was run over by a bus. It backed over her, then pulled forward over her again. We had fundraisers and pep rallies for her. She made a full recovery and is still playing sports at almost 40 now. Sex in the bathroom. Endangered turtle was found during construction. All construction had to stop until the turtle moved out. PE teacher, you know how that one goes. This seriously terrible girl who always smelled bad and screamed at people that she was a witch and she'd curse you kept bugging my buddy to sell her his Ritalin. He told her no a whole bunch of times, but finally about a week before the school year ended he needed money for something and finally agreed. She immediately went to the administration who called the police and he was both expelled and ended up in juvie. As far as I know she's still an insufferable piece of trash almost 30 years later. Not saw, but I did experience the aftermath. A kid at our school died once, while out on a school camp. They were way out in the Australian outback. The teachers made barbecue for the kids, and one of the boys, for some reason, ate the food, kebabs, without asking what was in them, even though his parents had filled out his permission form indicating clearly that he had food allergies. Long story short, hardcore anaphylaxis. Throat swelled shut, fell to the ground, foaming. School nurse stabbed him with every single EpiPen they had in the medical kit. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Fuck all happened. Picked him up, threw him in the van, and sped out of the campsite at top speed down the road. They were so far out in the middle of nowhere that there's no phone reception. Can't do anything. Can't call for an ambulance, helicopter, nothing. Finally got to the nearest town, called emergency services. Helicopter arrived, loaded the kid onto it, started treatment, flew straight back to town. Never made it. Dead before the chopper landed. I was working at the school at the time. I had a job offered by the school to graduates, which I accepted, and found out all the details from the school nurse. In 1981 I was in grade 4 and we had a sadistic teacher. She'd beat us for any reason. The worst I saw were two incidents. The first was when she caned a boy on his bomb. She thrashed his hand until the skin broke and blood gushed out. The second was when she called a boy up to the blackboard to solve a maths problems. Poor boy was so terrified he froze. She grabbed him by the neck and smashed his head against the blackboard several times. She regularly did this to him and eventually he ended up in hospital with a serious concussion. She taught there for many years and no one ever did anything about her. This was in South Africa and back then teachers were considered untouchable by most parents. If you came home complaining that a teacher hit you, you'd probably get another thrashing because the teacher was always right. She's dead by now and I hope she's burning in the deepest reaches of hell. A bald girl crying as she walked to class. Some absolute cunts had stolen her wig and run away with it. They knew she had brain cancer and couldn't chase after them. The wig was only returned after a popular boy made the girls give it to him. The girl died a few months later. Only bright side was that the girls who stole her wig had to change schools because no one would let them forget what a bunch of monsters they are. Play stupid games, win endless harassment because you bullied the quiet dying girl who was nice to everyone. At my high school there was this stairwell that people would go fool around in. It got to the point where it was called Blowjob Corner. Almost 30 years later my son goes to that school. I made a joke to him about staying away from the seaside stairs near the cafeteria and he said, "You mean Blowjob Corner?" They put cameras in because of that. Cut to me with surprised Pikachu face. The bullied kid, other than myself, absolutely losing his goddamn mind, and beating the hell out of his bully. There was blood everywhere, mostly on the kid. He was punching, he was kicking, he was slamming his head against a bench, he bit part of his ear off. No lying, he almost killed him. Broke several ribs, several fingers, his ankle, jaw. Apparently he had a ton of mental health issues, and deliberately stopped taking his meds just so he was unhinged enough to do that to the bully. People talked about it for years after it happened. A buddy of mine became a teacher there, it still apparently gets mentioned. It's like a folktale, over 18 years later. My gym teacher also taught health education. He would sit at the front of the class in his mesh shorts and no boxers and teach us about sex education. His dick would sometimes be visible. We had a class of 40 boys and 6 girls and apparently us girls were pretty naive cause we all brushed it off as an repetitive accident. In hindsight, as an adult, that asshole was showing his penis to teenagers on purpose and we were all too dumb and scared to realize. He was real handsy in gym too. It's not the worst story but still super gross. Gym teachers seem to have a high instance of creep/pedophile. One year we had a new student move in mid-year during the gymnastics units and the one gym teacher was handsy with girls, allegedly, trying to show them proper technique. She fucking slapped him across the face and told him not to ever touch her, or any other girl, without explicit permission. They tried to suspend her but apparently the reason her family moved is she was a survivor of sexual assault at her old school and they wanted a fresh start, and they'd go right to the news with the story if that's how the school wanted to play it. School backed down. That gym teacher was noticeably more hands-off whenever she was in the class. As a guy I didn't really notice it because he wasn't handsy with us, but after that incident people paid more attention and yeah, dude was a fucking creep. Once saw a teacher fully dump out a teenage girl's bag because he was convinced she stole one of his pens. Exposing her pads, tampons, phone, hairbrush etc., also her diary which some random kid picked up and started reading out loud while laughing. Exposing her life at home where her mom and dad are mentally abusive towards her, all the kids made fun of her and the teacher was just screaming her about a freaking pen. She ran out and about 20 minutes later the teacher found the pen under his papers. She transferred schools. A friend's sister drowned because her mother was on her smartphone and didn't keep an eye on her. Someone else tried to suicide by jumping. Edit, didn't work, quick recovery, but he was 12 years/0. Another kid was beating everyone and had anger problems. Turned out his parents beat him at home and calmed him down by force-feeding him alcohol beverages. Fucking hell. Edit, oh and a girl in my class lost her mother to suicide as well when she was 13-14ish. When I was a seniors I went to one of the trashiest schools in my state. Some real redneck pride kinda stuff. There were 2 freshmen, total boners but they were tough shit apparently. I remember it was the day before homecoming. They lured one of the special education kids into the boys' restroom and barricaded the door. They proceeded to beat the ever-living shit out of this kid and take pictures of each other forcing a barely conscious far-spectrum autistic kid to fel at them. This part I didn't see of course. What I did witness was after school. I got benched in football for smoking weed so coach made me help coach freshmen so I wouldn't feel left out or useless. The freshmen practiced on a different field that got a great view of the parking lot. The victim had already been taken away and the 2 other kids were being questioned at the school. This was probably an hour after school let out. An officer came out with off the attackers and was walking him across the pavilion. From the other side another person, huge dude, got out of their car and started walking towards the officer and then one attacker. When they finally crossed paths the huge guy gets one hit at the kid knocking him down immediately then dropped another first while the kid was flat against the concrete. Turned out the big guy was the autistic kid's dad and nobody ever saw the one attacker again. There were a couple rumors spreading, some said the kid was killed by the second punch and other people were saying that impact scrambled his brains. The other attacker I couldn't tell you, nobody cared enough about him to start any rumors or spread any news. A sexual assault happened in the lunchroom and the principal swept it under the rug and tried to cover it up. Then there were about 3 riots in the school. Everything got put under control at an assembly. She didn't admit to sweeping it under the rug, in fact she didn't even acknowledge it happened even though it was brought to her attention, she just paid attention to the riots, disregarding their meaning, and no, the girl who was assaulted never got any justice. I think she transferred schools. There was a car accident in front of my school. 3 kids in the class below me got hit at 95 miles an hour. The woman who hit them survived. 1 student died on impact, another died when they got to the hospital. The 3rd survived but was in a coma for the rest of the year. When he woke up he asked where they both were. Doctors had to lie to him about their whereabouts until his body was strong enough and the bleeding in his brain stopped. The woman got no jail time and the whole town went crazy. 2 weeks before that my best friend was shot in the face and died. We had constant therapists at the school and the road was closed until they could finally wash away all the blood. It's been 4 years and a lot of us still can't go where the crash happened without breaking down. That road before it becomes a school zone it's 35 miles per hour. Who knows what was happening with her and how she got off free for killing 2 amazing kids. There was a special needs kid that was a huge John Cena fan. He would come up the middle aisle in between all of the buildings where everyone hung out before first period, in his Cena shirt, hat, and chain while singing the theme song, and he would actively challenge people to fights by punching them in the face. He was a small kid and we all knew he was special so we just let it happen without incident. There were several race and gang fights that would amount to 30+ people just destroying each other. Not gonna dox myself but there are videos on YouTube for proof. During one of the race fights, I watched a very large Samoan dude lay out several fully grown adults while they tried to break up the fight, including the SRO and vice principal. We were told on several occasions that the reason why we had to carry 40+ pounds of textbooks up and down a bill every day was because they didn't trust us to have lockers due to weapons. My weight training teacher knocked out a kid while using brass knuckles, which he, teacher, openly admitted to carrying on him every day. There were multiple occasions where all of the teachers would get replaced by substitute teachers, undercover cops, whenever we would have a suspected school shooting/bombing threat. Perhaps least surprising out of all of that, my parents pulled me out during sophomore year because I was dealing drugs, ditching, and getting into fights. I'm doing pretty well now as an adult. High school was pretty fucked though. My black best friend in elementary school was hospitalized after an attempted lynching by 5 other elementary school kids. They successfully held her down, tied a rope around her neck like they were tying a shoelace bow, and hung her from a low-hanging tree branch. Thankfully, they had shitty choice in tree branches, because it snapped after a couple minutes, during which the attackers made themselves scarce. After a full-scale investigation was completed, it turns out the parents of these kids were Nazi enthusiasts who had formed their own off-brand KKK-flavored group, which the kids knew each other through. Kids disappeared from school, parents were arrested for I'm not sure what charges exactly, and my friend survived with a slight scar around her throat and a fresh diagnosis of PTSD.